Good afternoon and welcome to Lunchtime Series with me, Kevin Britz, proudly powered by leadershipbydesign.co, leading the charge with insights, information, and ultimately effective results. Joining me in today's leadership and coaching segment, we have a neuroscientist and subconscious reprogramming expert certified in theta healing. So yes, it's not something that's everyone knows about. So she helps conscious and spiritual entrepreneurs skyrocket their business success by removing subconscious belief systems, keeping them stuck. She's particularly passionate about working with entrepreneurs who are here to dismantle the oppressive system of patriarchy and white supremacy and use their medicine to create a just and harmonious world for all living beings, that is. Please welcome Alja Podgornik. Is that correct?
That was perfect. Hello, everyone.
Thank you for joining us. Yes. Before we kick it off, tell us, it's such a fascinating intro, and tell us more about who you are and where you are. And I know you're all the way from Germany, so please tell us a little bit about you.
All right. So yeah, hello everybody. It's an absolute honor being here. So my name's Alja. Originally, I come from Slovenia. I lived in England for 4 years, and now I'm in Germany. And my background is as a scientist. Really, I trained in academia for close to 10 years. So I went to England, finished my bachelor's and master's in neuroscience already, and then I moved here to Germany to do my PhD. So I'm coming from this very academic, strict biological, biochemical research field. And it was really, I oftentimes think how ironic it is, because my intention of going to study neuroscience was to develop a pill to solve neuropsychiatric disorders, which is very, I find it very ironic because, of course, eventually I actually ended up in natural health field, and I moved into that after I moved to Germany and studying my PhD due to my own personal health issues. And I spent many years there, which was a very interesting balance, to navigate between being in the space that's very analytical and quite frankly has a lot of prejudice when it comes to, natural health, like Eastern medicine and so on, spirituality, and being immersed in both at the same time. But ultimately, what I learned through that journey was that, I was healing myself and many of the chronic issues I was told I would never be able to heal over multiple years. And throughout that time, I started really understanding how Western science thinks, how it works, what are maybe beliefs and what are the ways of being that aren't actually the ultimate truth, right? And are maybe not serving us. And very interesting was because I was going into this natural healing field and I eventually started working there. I opened my own business in 2020, worked with many different people. And through that journey, I started really learning about the importance of emotions and the importance of belief when it came to health. I started noticing, I worked with multiple cancer patients. Every single one of them had issues with relationships. Every single one of them had very strange beliefs about what love means, like what healthy relationships are. They didn't serve them. So I started noticing these patterns. And then I was moving deeper and deeper into trying to understand what is really the root cause of what creates disease, but also the rest of our reality that we're experiencing. And eventually I came to the technique I use now. It's called theta healing. And theta is simply talking about that's a brainwave state in which we can access the subconscious. And we can maybe talk about more of this later, but that's where the name is coming from. And I had more breakthroughs with this technique in about 3 weeks than I had before in 2-3 years with breath work, somatic practices, yoga, natural healing. It started shifting my life in truly, truly dramatic, beautifully dramatic ways. So I became certified. And then I call it my second awakening came really late last year with what is happening right now in the Middle East, what's happening in Palestine, really starting to understand on a deeper level what are also belief systems that underlie supremacy, anthropocentrism, etc. And so I pivoted my business and really started working purely with entrepreneurs who themselves are really passionate about, let's call it, changing the world, and changing the world at a core belief where we're not looking at these top-down interventions, but we are changing who we are. We are changing the beliefs and programs that we have installed, quote unquote, in our brain, so that we can really, really change our behavior, that we can change how we perceive, yes, other people, other races, perhaps other religions, but also how do we perceive the earth? How do we perceive animals? How do we perceive other living being? Because it is our beliefs that underlie how we behave. And so if we are, as a society, as humanity right now, destroying the world and killing each other, their beliefs underlying that. What is the value? And so for me, that's really become then the core of what I'm working on. And in parallel of working with entrepreneurs, where I'm really helping them unravel and deprogram these beliefs that are holding them and keeping them small. Because there are so many people right now on this planet who have so much to offer and are truly, truly here to improve our collective experience as humanity. But on the side of that, I'm also getting now further education in really developing systems for specifically reprogramming prejudice and bias. So hopefully, maybe a year from now, that'll be also something I can offer on a bigger level. So that's a very long story, quite short.
No, I love that. And I love that there's so many elements and layers to that, because, and I truly believe that that's honest. When you look at belief systems, as you mentioned, you speak about the importance of emotions and the different modalities of yoga and somatic work and all the things that you've done. There's very many layers to it, but, at the core, the subconscious stores information and programs information in a way that it just does. And until we find a way to work better as humans and understand what our brains are doing, it's always going to be there, and it's always, it's designed to keep you safe, and it's designed to do the best for you. But I mean, when I put a call out to people out there, what was it about limiting beliefs? Because I know, that's just one of the areas. But what was it about that limiting beliefs that sort of you wanted to be able to share this message? Because essentially that's what we're going to be chatting about today, and the impact of that. But why this conversation for you?
Limiting beliefs create your life. And I am not joking when I say that. If you want to change your life, this is the quickest way to transform. Because here are the two things that you need to understand about the subconscious mind. To set the stage, right, many of you have heard subconscious mind is really, okay, people are arguing a little bit, but somewhere between, 98 and like 95, 89 and 95% of our mind, right? So the vast majority of it is lying below the subconscious, below the conscious awareness that you have. And your subconscious has it has one major role, which, as you mentioned, is to keep you safe, right? And then another thing your subconscious really likes to do is confirm your existing beliefs. So there's a part of the brain in the brainstem, right, called reticular activating system, which is really looking out for the confirmation of what you already believe to be true. So when you know that about yourself, you start understanding why we are so susceptible in being these bubbles, that think similarly. The algorithms work that way now, which is not very helpful in a lot of ways, but we are designed to seek confirmation. And this is also what underlies some of that part of the ego that we could call egotism, when we just want to be right. But the really core thing that is so important is to understand that our subconscious is trying to keep us safe. And so if they're at some point in your life, and I want to say this, it can go beyond your life, it can be coming from the ancestors as well. If they learned that some kind of behavior will keep them safe and will help them survive, your subconscious is always based on the past experience that you had. So even if your subconscious, even if you're having some experience, let's say that you grew up in a relationship that was abusive, like you watched your mom and dad have an abusive relationship, your subconscious entangled love with abuse. That can also happen if you're a child, and let's say that your parent abused you physically or emotionally, and then afterwards told you, I'm doing this because I love you. You create a belief that love is abuse, love is punishment, right? Now, your subconscious, this is kind of how it works, and it can be really rough, right? You are now having some experiences in your life, and let's say you get into an abusive relationship, and your subconscious is like, okay, yes, this may suck, but we know we can survive in this environment. Like, we've seen this before. This is familiar. And even though there are other opportunities out there that could be so much better, your subconscious is like, no, 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 no. Let's stick to what we know. And this is all default. If you're not aware of it, you cannot change it. And this is when we see one of the best ways to notice this is patterns. There are patterns showing up in your life. Let's say you always, you end the relationship, but you always end up with kind of the same person, right? And there's the same drama going on, the same patterns. There's a belief underlying it. Likewise, if you're in your business, entire time when you're doing your business, let's say every launch, halfway through your launch, you freak out and you drop everything. Or you're having clients who say they're going to work with you, and then last minute they're like, oh, actually, I changed my mind. If it's a pattern, there is something going on underlying that in the subconscious that's creating that situation in your reality. And when we start understanding and working with this, we can shift things drastically in our life. We can shift our relationships. We can shift our financial situation. We can shift like our body, our health. So it is the most profound thing I have found up until this point.
Yeah, and it's so fascinating because it's one of the reasons why I do what I do, because I remember having these questions come up in my early 20s, and I had this undeniable voice in my head saying, there has to be more to life than this. There has to be more to life than this. Like, having experience upon experience, and it's taken very many years to kind of get to where I am today, and still doing lots of work around it. But I mean, one of the things that I find fascinating as well, and hopefully you can put some perspective to it, is how to reprogram the subconscious for business success. Because a lot of entrepreneurs out there, a lot of leaders out there, look at their teams, look at their businesses, look at how do they. And one of the conversations I've had in my business and my success is like, how do you break through that ceiling, right? Because it feels like you just when you get to succeeding, then suddenly something stops. And like you're saying, unless you understand the pattern and potentially what the limiting belief could be, it just kind of seems like you have bad luck. And so how do some people have good luck and some people don't, right? And why am I one of the people who can't get that luck from, just because that's what people do. Then they go, okay, well, I just need to work harder. And that's not necessarily true, right? So shifting that paradigm could really open up a whole new life for you based on how that limiting belief is just actually trying to protect, right? But I mean, how do we do this? How do we get through that reprogramming for business success?
So always the best thing to start with is realizing where you have a problem, right? And why I'm saying this is really important because, I work a lot in the spiritual communities. And for example, a lot of people are like, I have problems with money. I must have money blocks. And that can happen. We absolutely can have beliefs around money. But, more than half of the time you look at those people and then you start analyzing what's going on in business and you're like, well, actually, you're attracting totally wrong clients, or you don't believe you can provide good service to your clients. So you're self-protecting from clients coming in because you're afraid that you won't be able to get them results and then they will turn on you and your business will collapse. Or you have no magnetism because you're not speaking your truth. You're afraid of showing up and being seen as the authority, as the leader, of really speaking your truth. And if you don't do that, you are not going to polarize people. And how do we create magnetism? Well, magnet has two poles, right? So you have to polarize to attract the quote unquote right clients and repel quote unquote wrong ones, right? And so you have to really break it down. Where is the problem actually? That's going to really speed up your process. Because if you start working on money blocks, but you have problems with visibility, we're working on the wrong thing. So that's the first thing I would say. Now, once you have identified where the real problem is that speaking your truth, being seen by more people, having very aligned collaboration, having aligned clients or having more clients, ask yourself the question, what would happen, or rather more specifically, what bad thing would happen if I had this? Because there is a layer in your consciousness, in your subconscious, that believes that if you had what you want, something bad would happen to you. And, I have seen many people, like you have, let's say, healers, and they're like, oh, I want this beautiful retreat center and have all these people. And then you start digging, and then sooner rather than later, they're like, yeah, but if we had all those people, there would be all those opinions. I would have to listen to others. They would try to tell me what to do. There would be a lot of these clashes. Turns out they don't really want a retreat center. Oftentimes they get to the point where they're like, I actually just don't want it. I thought I did, but I don't. And sometimes they're like, ooh, okay, let's change those beliefs around what do relationships look like in terms of people I collaborate with, right? So that's a really good question to ask yourself. Or if you're actually calling in more money, ask yourself, what would happen if I had that money? What bad thing would happen? And you will hear things like, well, someone will come and take it away from me, right? Or I will lose all of it. I'm not actually responsible enough to deal with it. And if those are beliefs around there, you will not allow yourself to get to that point. And then it's what you said, people start overcompensating with action. And they're like, I just have to work harder. And then it becomes a hustle. And this is also a very interesting point to look at. If you realize that you're always hustling in your business, that things are feeling really heavy, there are normally programs there. So it can be like a program that especially travels on the ancestral line, but can also be coming from this life, is that joy and meaningful work are mutually exclusive. So you can't do meaningful work and also have fun or be joyous. That can't happen. Or you have an obligation that work must mean suffering. To do meaningful work, you must sacrifice things. And that can all be tested. So the technique I use, there's a way to muscle test those beliefs, which is really great because you just see in real time, do I hold it or do I not hold it, right? And then we can go deeper and understand, because on some level, this belief served you. And when we understand how the belief served us and what we're learning from it, then we can complete the lessons we are learning and eliminate that belief from our life. Because then the subconscious is like, okay, actually, we don't need this anymore to learn the positive lesson, right? We can just move on with these qualities, virtues, motivations. So for example, a very interesting example, I'm going to give you a client I worked with last week. She was calling in more money. And it was fascinating because she was in a relationship with her partner. We talked, and it was a pattern that oftentimes she had partners that didn't really support her. So she was the one who was bringing all the money in. And she's like, it's very curious because, I always had a very successful business. But in the last 2 years, everything started going down and I had to live off of my savings. And I was like, that's very curious. We went in. She wasn't making money to punish her partner so that he would be forced to start bringing money into a relationship. So there was a subconscious resentment, revenge energy that was going on under the hood, right? So these are the kind of things that you really have to go beyond, just like money blocks, etc., because things can get a lot more interesting of our hidden agendas and motivations of the ego of why we're doing something. So, but always to bringing it back, identify problem, and thus ask yourself, if I had what I want to have, what bad thing would happen? And that can start giving you a really, really good insight.
It's fascinating because, I remember, I always bring up this story because when I was younger, my family, we grew up in a household where doing manual labor meant that you were making money. And one of my family members coined it that because I just didn't want to do manual labor. And I thought, there had to be other ways that I could make money other than having to do manual labor. He would coin it as lazy. So
yes.
for most of my life, I had this idea of, I can't really do much other than what I'm doing based on the fact that I'm lazy. And it was just a programming that my brain kind of just said, well, that's potentially true because he said so, right? But I mean, what I do find fascinating is you mentioned visibility, right? When people struggle because essentially with success, a lot of the time, responsibility comes with that. A lot of money could come with that. Being on, in a public forum. And I remember, when I started the Lunchtime series, I had this imposter syndrome kind of going, like, who the hell's going to listen to me? Like, why would they even listen to me, right? And essentially my need to want to help people was bigger than that voice. So I was like, well, whatever, I'm just gonna do what I can. But I mean, what is it about visibility and sort of that thing, like that protectiveness that we're hanging on to, that we just don't want to be visible, that we kind of keep ourselves small, because essentially no one's doing that on behalf of you. You're doing that.
Yeah, you are. And it's because you believe something about yourself, or you believe something about what other people would probably do to you, right? So we always the best thing to do is go back to your childhood and see how were you treated if you, let's say, expressed yourself authentically. Were you punished? Were you punished when you expressed your emotions? Were you told that crying is for, cowards? Or were you told that anger is unacceptable, right? Were you told that your ideas... Sorry?
So crying is for girls only. Don't cry.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly, right? Because we have to understand something really important. So our subconscious beliefs are mostly formed between ages 0 and 9, 0 and 10, because we are in that time in that brainwave state called theta, which is between 4 and 7 hertz frequency of, it's basically a bunch of neurons in the brain, like making, it's called firing, which means being active at the same time. So they create these waves of activity. And we are like sponges. We simply absorb what's happening in our environment, right? So we get our ideas of what is safe, what isn't safe, what is allowed, what isn't allowed. In that time, if our parents tell us, oh, you're really pathetic, you're really extra, like you're too much, right? Or you're not good enough at this and that, we're like, oh, okay, they must know, right? So we take on all of these beliefs. So around visibility, first thing I want to really, like, the point I want to drive home is, if you're having a quote unquote issue in your life, there's a reason for it, okay? There's always a cause and effect relationship, which is really amazing, because it means that if you find that root cause, you can uproot it and the problem's gone. Because it's very difficult, right? We can, in today's world, a lot of people are like, oh, and this happened and this happened and this thing happened to me. And I'm like, there's always a root cause, right? And a lot of the time is beliefs. So you gotta really be, a lot of the time it can be helpful to break down what would visibility bring with it. Because it's, as you said, there's responsibility. It's also, being actually heard and speaking your opinions, right? There's probably going to be backlash. I mean, in today's society, everyone's offended by everything. So like there will be haters. Like you cannot avoid that, right? And some people I know, they did this like thing I absolutely love, when they turned it into a metric, and they're like, when you got your first hater, then you know you made it, I think, which is a really cool way to spin it, actually, because today it's going to happen. And so do you have the resilience, right? And this is first thing that it comes down to is inner solidity. What do you believe about yourself? Because if you believe about yourself that you're a fraud, that you don't know what you're talking about, that you don't know enough, that it's not possible for you to know enough, etc., then if these attacks come, you're going to believe it. And that's really always showing you where there's work to be done, right? Triggers are always showing you that you have some more work to do. So this is the best thing you can do, which is why every entrepreneur I work with, we work on these core beliefs around how they view themselves, which mostly will come back to, how did your parents see you, right? So look at that. There could have also been traumatic events specifically related to visibility. And, just to say this, trauma, some people think we're talking about these really big things like accidents, losses, family death, but we can call this like micro traumas, where these are simply, things that really evoked a strong negative emotional reaction. And that's very individual. So something that's very traumatic to one person may not be traumatic at all to another. But it could be, let's say, that you had a performance in school and something went wrong and you felt really embarrassed and ashamed, or someone laughed at you. And you in that moment made that kind of pact with yourself that you're never going to get visible again, because that means punishment, that means embarrassment. So it's this entanglement that happens between concepts, entanglement that happens between the ideas when you say visibility means X. And this is what, when we do subconscious reprogramming, we disentangle, so that visibility no longer means that. And then you know that it's possible to be visible and be safe, right? To maybe have backlash, but know how to handle it, right? To have backlash and people questioning you, but know that you have your self-worth and know that you know enough, right? So that all of these things are not coming up. So that's always really important to look at. And my teacher for the theta healing says like 80 to 90% of issues go back to mom and dad. So if you analyze your childhood and you understand what the dynamic was like, you're really going to start seeing a lot of origins of the issues you may be experiencing in your life.
And I love that you say the entanglement of it. And that's really, because we don't anticipate that. At, between 0 and 10 years old, you're kind of going, you're just doing life, kind of doing your best, kind of figuring it out. And you're not purposefully sitting there trying to entangle these concepts or ideas that you have about existence or success or life or visibility. And that's what makes this conversation so fascinating. But one of the things you touched on the theta, the from 4 to 7 hertz, and don't you want to just unpack that a bit for us about the importance of that and what that work is about? Because I think a lot of it's not new, definitely not new in South Africa, but it's the more we study it and the more we now have these conversations, the more we realize that there are ways that we're tapping into the subconscious and suggestion and ways that we can redefine and reallocate information. But from the right position, that's going to get the best results. So tell us more about the theta and what that theta healing is about.
Yeah, so to understand theta, let's talk a little bit just about different frequencies of the brain and what they correspond with. So we have alpha, beta, gamma, theta, and delta. And most people spend most of their time in beta. So beta frequency, we're looking 15 to 30 hertz, roughly. And that is when you're very focused. So we are having a conversation right now. If we're not very stressed out, if we didn't have too much caffeine, we're probably in the lower beta. If you're really stressed out, freaking out, like on the verge of panic attack, we're looking at high beta, even going into gamma. So gamma is much higher frequency. We're not going to go too much into gamma. Alpha is the relaxed state of being. So some people will call it flow state, right? Here we're looking 7 to 14 hertz roughly. And it's when you kind of relax. It can also be when so I'm going to say this is important for people to think about. When you're watching TV, it puts you into this alpha state, which means you're very suggestible when you're watching TV. So what they're programming you with when you're watching certain movies, be mindful. It is not innocuous. Depending on what you watch, there can be ideas, there can be, we can really think of the level of frequency, right? Because sound and light have vibration that gets interpreted by the rest of you. There is suggestibility, which is why, subliminal messaging was used in the movies for a long time until prohibited. But alpha is also this, if you just like relax after a long day and you're just kind of like, oh, cool. Or if you're in this flow state, and it's very creative, right? This is creativity and ideas come in that space. And so a lot of, if you, for example, ever read, any of the interviews or reports from a lot of like these geniuses we think about, even like Tesla, Einstein, and so on, they had these little rituals, or musicians, where they would always, some of them had really interesting rituals to go into this brainwave state. Some of them would just report it, and, they had these biggest discoveries always when they were out on a walk or relaxing in the bath, because we're open for inspiration when we're in alpha or theta. Beta, not that good for it, right? And when a lot of people try to think their way to this inspired ideas, that's very unlikely to work, right? You're going to be kind of hitting your head against the wall. Then after alpha comes theta. Theta, as we said, about 4 to 7 hertz. And if you think about it, theta is the dream state. So you experience theta every night and every morning when you're waking up or when you're falling asleep. And if you've experienced the kind of, we've all experienced when you're kind of dreaming, but aware that you're dreaming, that's going to be like higher theta frequencies. So it's very much this. It's also used in hypnosis, right? And then afterwards is delta. Delta is deeply fascinating. That's kind of 0 to 4 hertz, and it's deep unconscious sleep. But if we learn how to stay aware, delta is when we're going to experience those feelings of complete oneness. So yogic traditions such as Yoga Nidra, for those who know what that is actually designed to get you into this delta and practice to stay awake so you don't fall asleep. So depending on how we learn to master these frequencies, we can do different things with them. But in theta, we really have this access to the subconscious. And so we may have, this is a lot of the time when people drift or go into theta, the memories will come up from our childhood, or we will see certain like visuals. Some people have visions, some people have knowings. There's a lot of creativity that opens up at that space. It's also really amazing for the nervous system, for like the body, for regeneration. But it really helps us get access to those things that are blocked off when we're in the conscious mind. And this is, I've had a lot of people come to me who say, Alja, I've been going to therapy for 5-6 years, and I feel like I've hit the wall. Like I'm not making any more progress. And the reason why that can happen is because a lot of conventional talk therapy is working just in beta. So you may gain understanding of the patterns. You may understand your childhood, but you don't have the tools to change that. Because to change it, you have to access the subconscious, really. And this is where the methodology I use is really designed to get you in this theta brainwave very quickly. Because I worked before, many that listen to this have heard of Dr. Joe Dispenza, who really works with these things as well, right? He's like using specific meditations and breathwork techniques to get you to this theta, delta, even like gamma brainwave, because gamma is where spontaneous healings can happen, where instantaneous, you go beyond time space. That's a whole other conversation. But he's teaching those things. The thing is that it can take years of practice to get to be able to hold theta or to get into theta quickly. Because it takes time to master the mind. And I know this because I worked with Dr. Joe Dispenza's students about 1.5 years ago. And it was, 2 hours of meditation every single day. And it was like some days you would just sit there and your mind would be like, da, 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 right? Or you would have to do an hour of breath work to even get into this space. And when I discovered theta healing, it uses a very specific visualization that gets you into theta in 30 seconds, 1 minute. So quickly. And then you're just in this state of mind. And the thing what happens in theta, which is really beautiful, is that you are in the space of a lot of neutrality. So things that may trigger you in another state, you are able to see them from a different perspective. You're able to understand them from a different perspective, and you're understanding what you're learning through certain experiences in life, where you're using certain mechanisms. And as you see that, you're like, actually, I can complete that. I don't need to learn in this way anymore. I don't need to learn through abuse. I don't need to learn through suffering. Wait, what do you mean work has to be stressful? Like that just, yes, I learned a lot from this, because we always learn from these things. We may learn a lot of perseverance. We may learn a lot of grit, right? Some things that can be really sneaky is that we may have a program that we need self-criticism to motivate us. A lot of, if you have very stressful business, have a look. Are you using guilt and self-punishment and self-criticism to motivate yourself to do the work? Because I wouldn't recommend that. That's like a rough way to get work done, right? It's gonna completely like mess up with your adrenals. It's gonna take so much of your energy. You're just gonna feel bad doing this work the entire time. And so we start seeing this from a higher perspective. And when you work, I always teach my clients how to do it themselves so that they're independent, because that's very important to me. But when you work with a practitioner one-on-one, then I'm there with you. We're both in theta, and we're digging together. I'm asking questions, and we're going further and further until we get really to the root cause of a specific issue. And then in that space of mind, we basically do reprogramming. So we disentangle these beliefs and shift it. So there's like some specific things we can do in theta. It's really like an energy-based practice, because every belief has an energy underlying it, which we hold in like our field. So we can pull some of the energies out and we can download new energies in through reprogramming these beliefs, which is then really powerful. I mean, I've seen clients have massive transformations within 1 day, really like life-changing things. And sometimes it's this really beautiful, like more subtle, gradual thing that like you do it, and then you look at your life a month later and you're like, wait a second, like my life looks totally different. And that's equally beautiful.
That I love that you've just unpacked that for us, because because we know about them, right? We've heard about delta and theta and alpha and gamma, but I think the way that you've just put that together for us just makes so much sense and clarity. But I mean, before I want to ask the sort of the greatest society question. Before I get there, can you give us one wonderful, because I can just imagine you've had some amazing stories. Can you just give us one kind of success story that just kind of blew you away? I mean, even from your own life, if perhaps that works. What are some of the success stories, or a success story that, by doing this type of work really allows for people to just change?
So I'm going to tell you like my story, because it also highlights some really weird subconscious programs that can hold you back. I've had wonderful ones with clients when they message me back, 3 days later, and they're like, I just gained, like 60 new followers and like 3 new signups for my program over the past thing. Like that happens with some regularity. But the one I had that really like blew my mind was that I was in this space, and I'm not joking when I say I was in a space. So a little bit of a background. When I started my business in 2020, at the beginning, everything was going really well. And then I got faced with what it means to run a business, not from the perspective of strategy, but all of my beliefs were getting triggered. That was before I knew theta healing. And I had massive imposter syndrome, like you were saying. I started doubting what I was doing, like it got to the point that I completely shut my business down a year and a half later. Even though I successfully filled my whole roster for my first program, I had a very successful launch. I had multiple people come into my program that was a year long. I was like, I cannot do this. And it was then this like limbo space for me for about a year and a half after that, when I was just trying to understand, why is this happening? And I couldn't gain clarity. I couldn't gain clarity on, who am I in this space? What am I offering? Who am I meant to work with? Like, and of course, I mean, if you don't have these things clear, like marketing's, a nightmare, like everything's a nightmare, right? Because it's just so hard to write copy. It's so hard to do all these things. I couldn't get out of it. I was frustrated out of my mind because, as someone who did a PhD and like studied abroad and all these things, I know how to work hard. Like that's not a problem for me. I have all of these qualities. So I worked with some coaches and they were like, you just need to get, your shit together, and like, you just need to make a choice. And I was like, that's not it. That's not it. And so that was going on for a year and a half. And then I learned theta. I discovered theta. I had some amazing breakthroughs with it. I was like, okay, let me get certified. I really need to understand and really start practicing this. And so one day I'm going for a walk after lunch, and it was a beautiful sunny day. And I'm like, okay, let me do some, reprogramming in the sun. And I sit down under a tree and I go into theta and I just start working through things and understanding and asking myself these questions and, reprogramming some things. And then I'm done. And I get up. And one really cool thing that happens when you spend a lot of time into theta brainwave is that you just get this kind of like intuitive little pings. You will walk down the street and you will just be like, ooh, I see this. Ooh, I see that. And I'm walking down the street towards home. And all of a sudden, I get this download, like inside. It was like, you believe you're a fraud. I just stopped and I was like, what? It was like, you believe you're a fraud. So I sit down on the bench. And I'm like, okay, what is going on there? And I muscle test myself. You're a fraud. I'm a fraud. And my body's like, yes. And I was like, okay. So I go into theta and I start working with this. And it shows me, the origin. And that went back into one of my past lives, like when I was a healer. So you can look into past lives, and if people don't believe in that, that's cool. We can work just with this life, but it can really play a big role. When I was already a healer, and I had a community, like I made a mistake and a community turned on me and they took my children away, because that would happen right during witch hunts and all of those things. And it created this really deep like fear around failing people. And I had this belief that I was a fraud. And if I start showing up and speaking out, people will see that and they will come and they will attack me. They will tear me apart. And so I see this and I see where it's coming from. And I'm like, oh, wow, like this makes so much sense. And so I go and I reprogram that, I pull it out, I replace these things, I do work around like some associated beliefs. And immediately, first thing with these big things, you will have a big release. So it can just feel like there's like, a huge weight lifted off of your body. And I felt it. I was like, oh my God, like I feel like, 200 kilos lighter. But the thing was, I started walking home and I just started getting ideas. I was like, this is who I'm meant to work with. This is my niche. Like I had complete clarity. Like I'm not joking when I say 5 minutes later, I had complete clarity around who I was meant to serve, who I was, what my main values were, what my mission is, and 2 weeks worth of content I had ready by that evening. That all happened following that one reprogramming, because this is also the thing, especially if you have a lot of people that I work with, there are people who really have big hearts. They really care about others. If you believe you're a fraud, if you believe that you're going to hurt someone when you do your work, you will not allow that to happen. And you're going to block yourself at a really early stage. And so long story short, in that like next month after clearing that, I landed like 6, 7 podcast interviews. I had multiple people coming to me and asking, hey, do you want to do this work inside of our containers? Hey, we have these people that would really need this. Hey, would you like to lead a workshop? Hey, I want to pay you for this thing. I had next week a client, coming to me. We had a 10-minute conversations about what I do. He was like, oh, okay, I want to work with you. How much do you charge? Oh, okay, pay in full on the spot. Events like that where I was like, what is going on? And since then, my business has been, growing and expanding just like consistently, and I'm still like working through these things. But this was this one belief that was really creating just this major constriction around the whole thing. And it doesn't always work that way, right? It's not always this kind of a breakthrough when you're like, oh my God, but you would be surprised. They're very, very common. That you will just walk away and the next day you'll be like, okay, like I know exactly what to do, how to do it. And things just start opening up super, super fast.
I love that. And I think that's so amazing. And thank you for sharing that, because, and I've also recognized where, people believe, whether they believe in past lives or not, the point is you have some kind of limiting belief that you have that comes from somewhere and you're not quite sure where it is. As long as you understand that you could shift that and you can disentangle, from that, let it go, and come up with a whole new set of beliefs, and suddenly everything shifts in your environment. It's so beautiful to hear that. But I mean, part of what you do, and as just an important part of the work that you do, is understanding the conditioned beliefs around perpetuating oppression within greater society. And I often joke, because I challenge the sentiments about the decisions that the world has made in the last 100 years. And we've been around for the last 100 years kind of, and people often coin that as, well, some of the things that we've done has been really great. And I'm going, well, all the world wars that have ever been fought were, those decisions were predominantly made by white men, and you kind of go, no one ever says that. No one actually says it, right? And you kind of go, that's the problem, right? We don't have wonderfully great leaders in the world that are female, or African leaders, or leaders of color, or Asian leaders, and kind of go, what about these leaders? Are we looking at that? Are they history makers, right? And my perspective on that is just kind of looking at, are we aware, or aware enough of what the world is presenting in totality as it is? And if we're not, perhaps we should be, right? So, but I mean, from your perspective, why is this an important conversation, and that perpetuating oppression that greater society has, and why is it that it's so strong for you to be able to speak about this?
One thing that I see both myself, but also many other people that I work with and that are in my circles. The question is, are we okay with our reality as it is? Because there are people, who come and they look at the progress we had in the last however many decades, and they're like, humanity has achieved all these amazing things, all this technological progress, and that's not wrong. But also, is a society where we have multiple genocides happening something that we want? Is a society where we have, still huge pay gaps between men and women something we want? Is that really what we're going for? Because instead of approaching it from this, these conversations can get very emotional very quickly. And this is because of beliefs, because when we have certain beliefs, they trigger emotions, and that's our ego trying to protect us from like seeing the truth a lot of the time. But if we remove ourselves for a second from the emotion and look objectively at the world we live in, I don't think we've created a very good reality right now. What is happening with our environment? How many species are going extinct? What has happened with the Amazon in the past couple of years? What is happening right now in Congo, where we still have slavery, massive exploitation? What is happening in Sudan? What is happening in Gaza right now? Are we okay with that? Also, let's look for a fact. We're having a lot of people right now on this planet that are justifying a murder of children. We should all collectively start very, very, very clearly asking ourselves, how is that possible? And this is a very interesting conversation to be having, because we need to be willing to first see the truth. Because what's happening right now and what's happened during every war and over the past multiple years, propaganda is all-time high. And propaganda, yes, there is a level, this is a very interesting conversation because people blame it on the propaganda. But here's the thing. Propaganda may have worked in the past. Today, it only works if you want it to. Because there are so many sources of truth that on some level you do not want to see either something about yourself, your beliefs, what you perceive other people to be. And normally that's because we always want to see ourselves as good people. I'm a good person. We never break down what that means, We just say at the surface level, I'm a good person. And that's where a lot of complacency and complicity comes from. We were also indoctrinated through a lot of systems, that we're not allowed to question authority. In school, the teacher's always right. At home, mom and dad are always right. And we may question things and get punished for that. So a lot of people do not question mainstream narratives around things because that's safe. That's comfort zone. They're afraid they would get punished, which is, again, so important that we work on ourselves and really seeing where those programs are running our life, because we cannot. People sometimes ask me, do you believe in free will? And the truth is, free will is gradual. It's not yes or no. The more work you do, the more these beliefs you reprogram, the more free will you have, the more you can see the truth and make an aligned choice. And so to me, what we need to simply ask ourselves is one question: do we want to keep it this way or do we want to change it? Just like in business or in a relationship. There's no, I'm not, from the highest level perspective, there's no right or wrong. Now, I have my very strong opinions of how I feel around certain exploitation, genocides right now and so on. But from a higher, let's say if you believe in God, then the highest expression of that, it's basically what do you want to create? Your creator, what do you want to create, right? But is that what we want? Do we want the world where this is going on? And the problem we're having right now is that the vast majority of people are saying, no, we don't, but they're taking the actions that affirm the same reality, that recreate more of the same reality. And now the question is why? And, I'm just going to very, very bluntly say, we had a beautiful example of this 2 days ago, where Israel massacred 200 plus Palestinians in the Nusayrat camp to save 4 hostages, to rescue 4 hostages. The West was celebrating that. They were celebrating 4 lives of white people at the expense of, now the number is 274 massacred. Let's leave aside that they came in aid trucks, right? Which is its own kind of vile way of doing things. But this number should send shivers down your spine, because it's showing you how dehumanized one part is. And there are beliefs underlying this. What do we believe about those people? And we were heavily programmed through post 9/11, in the US, that all Arab men are terrorists, that Muslim men are terrorists. It's important also to understand we have to go to genetic beliefs, because our ancestors had their own clashes. So for example, if you're coming from the country where I am, even 13th, 14th, 15th century, there were invasions by Turks. You can still find genetic level programs that Turkish people are dangerous, even though you may never have had a bad experience with that in your life. So it will take for us first seeing, how do we perceive other people? You know, is it really okay that we think some people are worth more than others? Like, I don't want to subscribe to that belief. I don't believe in that, right?
Yeah.
But a lot of people are, because it serves them. They think it serves them. Honestly, as long as there's any human being oppressed on this planet, no one is free. And if you are under these systems of, you know, colonialism, white supremacy, imperialism, exploitation, and so on, you are oppressed, really, because that's not the mind that is free. But the truth is that on the quantum physics level, it is the unified field of consciousness that creates matter. So whatever we are observing in our physical reality, there's an energy underlying it, and this energy is collective consciousness. And we have to take responsibility. The things that are happening in the planet right now, it's because of us. We created that. It's not just happening. You know, a lot of people like using passive voice. Those people were killed. No, say it. Who did it?
Yeah.
Who did it? There was a war. Who did it? Let's take personal responsibility. And we need to do this. Just like the moment we realize that in our life, we are creating the experience we're having, that moment we can change it. The moment we can look at the world and say, we are creating this, we can change it. And then comes the education and understanding the interconnectedness, understanding how, you know, Gaza and Congo and Sudan are all interconnected, all three genocides, right? It's not independent. They're all the same systems and forces behind it. Then it takes seeing the truth, understanding the truth, and that's saying we're no longer okay with us. And we're seeing now, right, the systems like that, I believe, are crumbling. What we're witnessing, they're going kicking and screaming. And that's going to take a while. It's going to be chaotic. But we all can do our individual work. We should never underestimate that, because us doing individual work has always a ripple out effect, which is very beautiful, very, very beautiful. And also, what are the values we stand for? And are we standing up for them, right? Or are we silent observing, being passive observers in the back? And if that's the case, and we understand, hold on, that's not what I want to be anymore. Why is that? What am I afraid of? And then we can do reprogramming. So it's all intertwined. The personal and collective are highly intertwined. But everything we see in our reality, think about it that way. Your brain's the hardware. Subconscious programs are software, right? Your computer without software, what is it doing? Nothing, right? So software we can change. We can reprogram it. And that's going to change our reality, because we're going to behave completely differently. We're going to think differently, feel differently, and we're going to take drastically different action. And this is what we need right now as humanity.
And I applaud everything and wholeheartedly support what you've just said. And, you know, I'm so glad. The intention was, when I, you know, put out the request on the Facebook group, to kind of go, I really want to have conversations that people don't expect to be having, right? And, you know, limiting beliefs is a conversation, but the layered conversation deeper to that, you know, rightfully so, is, you know, I am responsible for my reality and the reality I'm choosing to create as part of, you know, the consciousness that we see today. And if I don't intentionally, you know, start waking up to the truth, as you say, and start realizing that, you know, in the smallest way, but still participating in it, what am I doing about it? You know, if you're not actively working on yourself, working on the limiting beliefs, the stories that have been programmed to such the degree that it has, you know, why aren't you doing it? Right? You know, the question is, then what are you doing? You know, so money is wonderful and success is wonderful, but to what degree and to what lack thereof, you know, and how does that impact? You know, we have to be able to have difficult conversations and speak and, you know, understand where we all fit into that equation, because like you say, collectively, we are creating this reality. And currently it's just not good enough. You know, it's just not good enough. So, you know, thank you for being on the other side of this conversation right now, because I think that conversation is a necessary one, and more people need to have it. And how do we start? By getting, hold of Dr. Alja Podgornik. Is it Podgornik?
Podgornik, yeah, perfect.
And you start with self. Start with, what are your limiting beliefs and what are you doing about it? But just to close this off, if you want to sort of get hold of you, Dr. Alja, where do we go? What's the best way to do this? And what is your closing sentiments of today's conversation?
So if you want to connect with me, Facebook or Instagram, you can find me under Dr. Alja Podgornik or Alja Podgornik. We'll put links underneath as well. I also have, for everybody who wants to experience, especially for entrepreneurs, reprogramming, I have a mini course that you can take for free. And that will guide you through kind of the process. You have a really beautiful workbook where you can start working through some beliefs, and you get to try one of the subconscious reprogramming meditations, which is going to start really programming your subconscious for success. And we go through self-trust, we go through definitions of success, all of these things. And you can try that and you will see. I mean, there are some people who try this and they're like, I love it, because theta feels so amazing. I was that. And you can just get a really, really clear idea. Is that something you would want to explore deeper, continue with? And then get in touch with me on social media, send me a message, check out my content. I have a lot of cool content there to kind of create some really beautiful shifts already. And I'm very happy to connect with anyone at any point. So just get in touch with me and we'll continue the conversation. Yeah.
And yay. And thank you for the mini course. I love that. That's so exciting, guys. She's a neuroscientist and subconscious reprogramming expert certified in theta healing. And all the links that she just spoke about will be in the description boxes below. So go and click on it, get in touch, go and check out that mini course. Dr. Alja, thank you so much for joining us. And thank you for being here. It was fantastic having a conversation.
Thank you for having me.